Yes, you are still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Today we are reviewing governorship and state houses of assembly polls. And before we do that, let's get a bit of more information from our correspondent, Oyemi Ajayi.
The much anticipated March 18 governorship elections have come and gone, with many issues erupting, which cannot be forgotten in a hurry. It was a tug of war in 28 states as contenders slugged it out vigorously, and winners have emerged already in some states, while collation is ongoing or being concluded in other states. The Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room in preliminary assessment commended the INEC for improvement in the time of opening of polls and deployment of materials for the elections. But of general concern were incidents of violence, especially in Lagos, Kano and Niger states, to mention a few, which witnessed voter intimidation, disruption of election process by thugs and gunmen, in addition to reports of refusal to upload results by some INEC officials. Also, there were cancellation in some polling units due to overvoting and pockets of violence in some parts. The response of the Nigerian police in some states, especially Kano State, where 161 suspects were arrested due to various electoral offences, including attempted arson, votes buying, disruption of election materials and possession of weapons and hard drugs, has been commended as well. However, the Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room is advocating for an independent inquiry into the conduct of the 2023 general elections towards addressing all of the identified pitfalls going forward. On its part, the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) expressed satisfaction with the conduct of the governorship and state assemblies elections, while regretting electoral violence recorded in some states, leading to the death of one ad hoc staff. In all, what are some of the lessons learned from the 2023 general elections? What areas need to be improved upon? Guests already seated will be discussing these questions and more shortly.
All right, thank you very much, Oyemi Ajayi, for that backgrounder. With us in the studios right now, we would like to welcome Dr. Iroro Izu, who's a political economist as well as election and development expert. Now, he teaches at the University of Abuja, where he's in the Department of Political Science and International Relations. Dr. Iroro, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigeria.
Also here with us in the studios is a regular on Good Morning Nigeria, Cynthia Mbamalu. Of course, she's a very well-known election monitor and director of programs at Yaga Africa. Cynthia, glad to have you this morning.
Good morning and good morning, Nigeria.
All right. We hope to have guests from Kano. Of course, we've just had the declaration of a governorship election in Kano. And we're going to have a guest from there very shortly. He's Dr. Rauf Zakariao. I hope I got that correctly. Also, DIG could also join us before we conclude this program. For now, we have a lady and gentleman with us. And I'd like to begin with Cynthia Mbamalo, who, of course, I know has been monitoring these elections. And, of course, she has foot soldiers across the nation who are also monitoring the elections. She's in a better position to kickstart this conversation. So let us see to what has transpired so far.
Well, you know, after the presidential elections, we had a conversation around how that elections went. And I think for these elections, we did see a marked improvement as it relates with logistics. So as simple as opening of polls, we recorded earlier commencement of voting at polling units. And that, for me, is an improvement from the 25th February elections. Thankfully, INEC tried his best to get polls opened on time. We also had reports of the Beavers was deployed and used across the polling units we observed. So Yaga Africa had the parallel vote tabulation in 3 states, Benue, Delta and Kano states, but we also had roving observers across the other 25 states where the governorship elections were holding. So we covered the 28 states where governorship elections was being conducted. And so for the elections, I can say that we had marked improvement when it came to logistics management, deployment of the beavers, the IREV. We could see results were uploaded, so we can say the IREV finally kicked off and worked for these elections. However, you know, part of our observation was just the negative interference of the process across different states. And for Yaga Africans, at the night of elections, we had received 215 confirmed reports of critical incidents across the states. And that for us is a huge number. Reports of disruption of the process at polling units and at collation centers. In fact, collation centers became more violent compared to even the polling units, because we had more reports of disruption of the process there. And if you follow the statement by National Commissioner Festus, he also did indicate that some of their staff, INEC officials, were attacked. Our report did capture that we had locations where INEC officials were attacked, some were abducted. And that for me is a worrying trend, because if we say we are working with Electoral Commission demanding accountability for a better process, but the political actors are planning on ways to undermine the credibility of the process, most especially voter suppression. I think for this governorship election, that is one thing we saw. Voter suppression, locations where voters were not allowed to vote, not just Lagos, because most times, you know, because of the social media presence, most times you think it's happening only in Lagos. There were reports from other states, Lagos, Rivers, Delta, Kano, even Taraba, where we had more locations where there were attempts to disrupt the process, where people were denied their right to vote, or you voted and they were the ballot box and papers destroyed. I think Lagos, what stood out more in Lagos was the ethnic profiling that we saw in this election. That is a sad trend for our democracy, because in such a diverse country, we cannot limit issues around governance to ethnic identity or to be influenced by ethnic identity. And the Constitution guarantees the right of every citizen to participate, the right to vote and be voted for. And I think for elections, we need to do better to ensure that every citizen has the equal right to participate and be voted for. But I mean, post this election is a broader conversation around citizenship and indigenship. I think we need to go back to the drawing board and have that broader conversation. But generally, you could see the results coming in. We can see that we had, process-wise, the commission did what it could. There were still instances where there were flaws on the part of the commission. So there were locations where elections did not hold. The reports from Benue Kandi local government where there were matched ballot papers within the local government. So the elections did not hold on the 18th of March. And there were locations in Plateau where the beavers for some local government and polling units were deployed to wrong polling unit, so they couldn't commence the process, because you know the beavers is configured to polling unit, so you can't take one beavers to another location. There were locations where there were still reports of insufficient election day materials. We're not sure why that still happened in these elections, because INEC had said it to go overboard when it comes to its planning for these elections. So those are still issues that require reform on the part of the commission, at least institutional reform, because that is within the institution. And so for these elections, I would say it's a mixed reaction. Why you can see the improvement, because I don't think anyone is happy with the reports around the disruption. We've lost, at least Yaga Africa took note of about 8 casualties, 8 individuals that we've lost, 8 Nigerians. Now the numbers could be more. This is just based on our own report. And you can't imagine an elections where we're losing citizens to a civil process. And that for me is unacceptable. We need to see more arrests by the security agencies, because at this point we are supposed to be getting reports from police that this is the number of arrests and these are the people that will be prosecuted for the infractions of the process.
Let me ask you this. Could it be tagged a satisfactory election, if you know, by your standards, so your calculation? Because of course we've heard from INEC, the man in charge of voter education, saying that yes, in spite of all that, you know, all the discrepancies that you have mentioned, he has also mentioned and admitted that the election was satisfactory.
Well, I would not necessarily use satisfactory. What I would say is we had an improvement, And for some of the states that we're seeing the results, we can also see that the results in some of the states are a reflection of the vote cast at the polling units. And so to that extent, we can say process-wise, there was an improvement. And why I wouldn't use the term satisfactory, because for me, election is, you can't discuss issues in silos. You need to look at the overall process. And if there are citizens who feel that they were victimized in this process, if there are people who feel that they've lost loved ones to this process, if there are people who feel that their family members were killed for no just reason, it also means that there's a section of society that is in mourning because of an election was conducted. So process-wise, I can say it was satisfactory, but the general election itself, I believe that there are still lots of questions. We can do better as a country. We can't keep having an election, and I don't want us to keep excusing things, say, at least we tried, let's move forward. We need to, as a people, get to that point where we say, no, we want to see the integrity quotient of an election at a higher level. We want to say that an election is civil in its sense, that voters who are eligible to vote got their rights, got the freedom to exercise that right to vote, that the process went well in the sense that we did not lose citizens, and that if there are conversation around the process, we're talking more around maybe things around, okay, what can we get, how can we improve on what we've done so far. And I think for me, that's why I wouldn't use satisfactory generally. For the process, I can say reasonably satisfactory, but if we're looking at the election as a wholesome process, I do believe that there's still a lot that needs to be done, because I don't think every section of the community, some people are in mourning today, and no Nigerian deserves to be in mourning just because an election was conducted.
All right. Cynthia, thank you very much there for your opening comments. Let's bring in now Dr. Iroro. Dr. Iroro, what is your assessment of Saturday?
Okay, thank you for having me this morning. I would align myself with Cynthia in the area that it was a marked improvement on the February 25th presidential election. However, it also speaks to the fact that after that election, because of how it went, politicians became generally desperate, because many of them were not sure anymore of their position in their states. So that desperation, was what led to this brigandage that we saw all over the place. The attack on polling units, the use of thugs, and so on and so forth. However, the INEC, assured us that the logistics problem that we saw during the presidential election would not resurface this time around, which of course they tried in that area. You recall that in the post-mortem of the presidential election, the discussion, the conversation was around the issues of INEC officials' incapacity or inadequate preparation. But now, we're not talking about INEC again, we're talking about the security. Because I recall that we were here with the DIG, who told us that they had put in place all mechanisms to ensure that this election would be better off. But somehow, the major issue we had in this election was the security threats, the killing of people. Of course, if we want to assess the election, we'll say that it's not satisfactory, because if one person has died, it's enough to discredit the entire process. That means we didn't get it right in terms of, because the voters must be protected. They are going to choose their leaders. So the sanctity of life, is a priority, which in this case has not been guaranteed. Another trend that I want to bring out in the election is the robust participation, involvement of young people. Now we could see that there have been some upsets in some states, like in Plateau, for instance. A young person, even a lady, defeating the incumbent speaker. It speaks it speaks volume to the fact that the young people, perhaps they are no longer interested in waiting for tomorrow, where they'll become leaders. They want to take their destinies into their hands today. They are going to see that, and the older people, they don't want to even believe the negative historical reports given to them by their parents. They want to ensure that they redefine and readdress their own situation, and model their future for themselves. So you see a lot of them going into the election, getting involved, not just by voting, but by contesting. And we could see that across Nigeria.
Okay, Iroro, thank you very much for the points that you have raised. I want to go back to Cynthia. Well, you were part of the Not Too Young to Run movement that led to amendments to the Constitution. Even with the challenges that we've had with this cycle of elections, is there some silver lining in terms of outcomes and participation of young persons?
Yeah, I could say there's been some silver lining, not as we were hoping. And that's because the direct beneficiaries of the Not Too Young to Run are those who are in their 20s who won the elections. Because the law basically reduced the age to 25. And I'm glad Dr. Izu mentioned that we have 20-something-year-olds who won elections. There's a young lady in Kwara, which I'm very excited for because I did follow her campaign. We have a young 27-year-old who won the House of Representatives, who would be in the House of Reps. That is a young lawmaker. But for the State Assembly, we're seeing younger people. There was an expectation that for state assemblies would have younger lawmakers because at that level, you had younger candidates contesting there. However, we're expecting a lot more. And that's because before the primaries, we had a higher number of youth aspirants across the political parties. And I was listening to your conversation earlier. The conversation was around, for the young people, a lot of them had to fight tough to even win the elections because the system is not very easy. And they are not here to kick out the old in the sense, but basically to change. I know you said your seats, it's not you we're kicking out. But the thing is, for younger people who are getting into this space, a lot of them are frustrated and they believe that they could do better. They believe that they have a lot more to offer. And you wouldn't blame them because youth constitute a higher population. And if you don't get younger people into government now, it means that the policies that would be driving the Nigeria of today and tomorrow will not be policies that addresses the issues of the youth, who are the leaders of the present and tomorrow. And so for me, we were expecting more numbers. However, the system was not so favorable. There were some young people who were rigged out from primaries, not because they did not have the capacity or competence, but they didn't have the monies and the right individuals behind them. In the sense, they didn't want to subject themselves to godfathers who would determine the way they ran office if they won. And so there's that thing. But we're still seeing good upsets. There's a young guy in the north who won the election over a long-standing member of the State Assembly. We have some young women too. There's this young woman in Enugu too. I know you also talked about the young man from Enugu also. And so we're seeing younger people, especially those in their 20s who are winning elections. We're still taking note, we're still counting. We're hoping that we'll have a lot more. In 2019, we had about 101 young people who were under 35-year-olds who won the elections, and about 20 who were under 30-year-olds who won the elections. And at this point, we've not gotten up to 20 under 30-year-olds, which is why we're worried that there may be a decline, because we're expecting that as we progress in our elections, we should have at least 50 under 30-year-olds who won their elections. But at this moment, we don't have up to 20 like we had in 2019. But let's keep watching to see what happens. But it's not just about winning elections. It's about performance. Exactly. And so for us, we would be engaging, not just because we're part of Not Too Young to Run, but I think for every Nigerian, for their constituents, we need to work with these young lawmakers so that they perform optimally. And if they perform optimally, it also opens up the space for younger candidates to contest. And then for women, because I always bring in the women factor. We're seeing at least more women being celebrated for the State Assembly's elections. We don't know what the numbers would look like. In 2019, we had 44 women who won in the State Assembly elections. We don't know if we'll have 44 or more. We're hoping it will be more. But I'm looking forward to the Northwest, because Northwest had just one woman, Kaduna. I know there's already one woman who has won in Kaduna. I'm hoping that we would have at least more than one, because Northwest, 7 states. It doesn't make sense that post 2019, 2019 elections, only one in the 7 states. So I'm hoping we would see more women win. Thankfully, there's one in Kogi. I think Kogi didn't have a woman, because more of the women from the North Central were Kwara, Plateau, and Niger. But now we're hoping that at least we'd have more women across the geopolitical zones.
All right, Cynthia. Obviously, in the next round of elections, we're going to look for a sponsor for Cynthia, to run for, because she has a lot to offer, from all indications. Her understanding of the system is good for such persons to also be in the implementation level.
We will look for money bags.
Exactly. We know what to do. We know what to do. Where should declare interest? We know what to do. All right. Let's bring back the political scientists with us here. You raised some concerns about the elections. You did the break and date. Let me use your word. Okay. And of course, the INEC official used discrepancies and all that. Now, I'm not talking about the process. Yes, some governments have been declared winners, some members of House of Assembly have been declared winners, but of course the process in some areas are questionable, right? Some, like in Enugu where I come from, some persons are complaining that a particular part of the state, that there was no beavers used during the elections, but the elections were conducted and results, emanated from such places. And Nigerians are so litigious, especially politicians, right, in terms of determining who really won. Nobody gives up easily, right? So now, what can you make of the process? And of course, the general system in the entire political milieu of Nigeria going forward?
Okay, one other thing I want to say, by answering this question is the fact that in some areas in Nigeria, in some states in Nigeria, our democracy is systematically, becoming a kind of plutocracy, government of the rich, those who have money, who are money bags, those who can induce voters. Because I know, from my state, for instance, I got a report that, you see, and you go and vote. After voting, after casting your vote, you are given a wrapper. After casting your vote, you are given envelope, of money. That is a mark of, although even before the election, when I asked some players, in the political space in my state, they said that 3 things are going to define the election. 1, this money for votes. 2, violence. And 3, of course, outright and rigging. So it is painful that we seem to be retrogressing in the area of the process now. Now, not just the outcome, because, of course, many people are already preparing, for litigation. And this should not be coming, at this time of our democratic trajectory. So I think we are not really making, serious progress in the area of, conducting a free and fair and credible, election. People are still highly disenfranchised. In those areas where, there were voter and suppression, beavers, we are not, or the materials didn't get to the place, and INEC has also said that they may not, or they will not conduct or reconduct election in areas where there were violent, disruption. And of course, that means those people in that vicinity, the eligible voters have been technically disenfranchised. That itself is a problem, to the electoral process. So another thing I want to say is that it also causes the fact that we need to, be talking about this Electoral Offences Commission. Now, they recommended it during the 2007 Mohammed Owais Commission, Electoral Reform Committee, but nothing has been done about it. If we have a commission that deals solely, squarely with electoral offences, I believe they will be, they can properly document these offences and deal with them, head on. Because, people, the police have said that they have arrested a lot of persons, that wanted to perpetrate or perpetrated, electoral violence or offences. Before long now, we will not hear anything about them again. We should have people punished, for situations, like this. You cannot just come and kill people or scatter, a civilized, process and go scot-free. Because some of these people, they are being sponsored by some big politicians. And tomorrow, you will not even hear anything about it again. So if people do this kind of thing and they go scot-free, it's emboldening, future perpetrators to do the same thing. So for now, the process is still fall short, a great deal.
Dr. Iroro, thank you. I'm still on the disruptions to the elections, as Cynthia said, from their monitoring in various parts of the country. when you watch the video clips of some of those incidents, you just ask yourself whether this was a war or whether it was an election. And sometimes do people recognize the fact that when you destroy a ballot box, you destroy ballot papers, those are actually public assets that you are destroying. And one of the highest, I mean, a felony is a felony, but depends on the category. You then have capital offenses and so on and so forth. But I'm wondering, Cynthia, look, do we just see this as offenses committed in the course of elections and electioneering? And yes, election offenses tribunal, that's fine, but how do you explain the fact that nobody is wearing a mask and telling you that, listen, if you are not going to vote for me, for XYZ party, don't come out? Or people will openly storm a polling unit just to cause disruption. And then you see, there were some instances where the citizens fought back.
Yes.
And I did say, I hope we're not getting into a situation where in future elections there will be a resort to self-help. Cynthia.
I'm glad you said this last part, because what is going to happen is we're getting gradually to a place where elections will be so chaotic that we can't even fathom what would happen. Because when people get pushed to the wall and decide to resort to self-help, it just becomes uncontrollable. And I think for this election, one thing that stood out is the resilience on the part of the voters. You mentioned some communities, people had to fight back. And I would commend Nigerians who, despite the threats, despite the challenges, still went out to cast their votes. Some Nigerians secured or had injuries. You could see some pictures. People had injuries just because they wanted to vote. But the point you made about should we treat this as electoral offenses when we know that this, for me, this is a criminal thing? I do believe that a crime is a crime. Whether it is committed during voting process or committed during primaries, because most times they tell you, oh, it was committed, during primaries too. Some particular primaries are also very, very disruptive and violent. I do believe that we run a system where state institutions constantly want to look for excuses on why they shouldn't do what they ought to do. And I bring this in the context of the role of the security personnel in these elections. Security, especially the police. We have a law that says the police is responsible for issues around law and order. When a crime is committed, they have the powers to arrest, prosecute such offenders. A crime is a crime. You talked about destruction of the ballot boxes. These are materials produced and purchased with taxpayers' money, so national funds. So it's as good as destroying an institution of government, because you are destroying materials produced by government with national resources. And for me, that is a crime. A Nigerian is killed during voting process. It is murder. It's not an electoral offense. A murder has been committed because someone was killed during an electoral process. An individual was beaten up. There was an official that was beaten up with machete. That is a crime against that individual. It's infringing on that individual's right to dignity of person, and it is a crime against that individual. It is battery. In the simple sense of it, assault is, yes, people that are threatened during elections. That is assault. And for me, when we start making excuses and saying that, oh, this is it is an electoral offense, and so we want to wait for INEC, because you also hear the police saying, oh, INEC is the one responsible for prosecuting electoral offenders. And I'm like, no. You have a role. Your budget does not. So it's not suspended during election. There's no national budget that's safe for the Nigerian police. The budget runs from this period. During election, it is suspended for anything security. We will move it to INEC, and then post-elections, we start to provide funding again for your role. No, you have a budget that runs through the year to fight crime in the society. And so for me, what we want to see from the Nigerian police, honestly, is to prosecute offenders that were caught in these elections. Criminals, because when we use offenders, we start people think it's a
misdemeanor.
A misdemeanor. Yes. Offenses were committed, people were killed, election processes were disrupted, funded and publicly purchased election materials were destroyed. We want to see people arrested and punished for that because they are criminals. But also, what about those who threatened lives? Because when you limit people's right to vote, it is an infringement on the fundamental human rights of those individuals. And so for me, the Nigerian police, when it comes to these elections, we want to see them take action, because if they say let us wait for INEC to prosecute, you and I know that a lot of these people will go scot-free.
Yeah, thank you indeed, Cynthia. You know, on several occasions on this platform, you know, when we have the opportunity as presenters to discuss on what the papers are saying, you know, I've said a number of times, you know, that we've had correspondents who covered elections elsewhere. My colleague also did. But my point is this, you know, this is a nation, a developing nation. We have refused to grow up when it comes to elections. During elections, even the gentleman that you knew becomes ungentlemanly and will behave animalistically within the period of that election until the election is over. That's what we see. So nobody is gentle in the election. So I was advocating a force to that effect. For instance, if you come to a polling unit and you see one black-faced 2 or 3 armed military men or Air Force men facing you, and you're coming to machete, you drop your machete. You drop it and go. So I see, because I know it may not be civil to say, look, why are you involved in the military? It's a civil activity, but there's also security aspect of it, which is what we're suffering now.
Yeah, in Benue on Saturday, there was a thug who was alleged to have stormed the polling unit. I think he was armed with a machete, and of course, the military patrol team was invited, and I think in the encounter, he was put to sleep.
Exactly. So now, we have an information coming from, we're going to get back to that question, because I'd like both of you to actually, you know, talk on that. Jamaha Adamu, Manager News, NTA Kano, will be joining us very shortly in Kano Metropolis to discuss a curfew that has been imposed in Kano and the intrigues following the declaration of a governorship election in that state. So when we receive signals from Kano, we shall be joining him for further discussion on that.
Kira, and just to also point out, Iroro, we didn't have you during those conversations. Neither was Cynthia available. Ahead of the March 18th elections, we had a series of editions of Good Morning Nigeria on battleground states. None of those battleground states has disappointed in terms of the outlook, whether violence, disruption of voting, and so on and so forth. Those states that we ticked off as being potentially violent didn't disappoint. So, which brings us again to the issue that I asked Cynthia a while ago. That namely, look, I know you talked about having an electoral offenses commission, but well, why does it appear that we are unwilling to deal with just plain criminality? Plain criminality. And we have also seen instances, and I'm surprised, Kirian, that the media is not taking this up. Journalists were attacked on Saturday in the course of the election.
Yes,
these are infringements on fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution. So what is it that we need to do? By the way, if you look at the way these attacks or intimidation incidents went on, these were apparently very well coordinated in the locations where they occurred.
Of course, the thing is that it's because those people that are perpetrating the acts, the criminal acts, you know, they're not doing it on their own. They have serious backers, you know, from the political class. You know, so, and it boils on the fact that this height of desperation should not be there. If you have performed in your state, even if you are not contesting for a re-election, but you have a candidate, you should not be so desperate. Your performance should speak for you. You know, so, but because they have not performed, you know, and they have some surrogates that they want to put there, you know, some stooges that they want to put there to cover, the misdeeds that they have done, because I know some governors have taken so much loans, borrowed so much, and they want to bring their stooges, to cover up their, their debts, their tracks. So because of that, they are seriously desperate. In some other states, you see some incumbents, they want to, because they have some people who have been, power brokers in the states, they want to unseat them so that they will become the new power, the new godfathers in the states. I know of a state, where a particular former governor, has been the major godfather in the states. The incumbent who is finishing his two tenure, has brought his own person, and he did everything, completely, possible to ensure that his candidate wins, and he becomes the new godfather in the state. So those kind of things bring about a lot of desperation, and the political class must be, the security agents, must up their game to the extent that nobody should go scot-free. This idea of immunity, for governors or people hiding behind immunity to perpetrate a series of crimes. Now the police has arrested more than 100 people. Those people, they were sent by some persons. It should not just be those people that will be punished. They should do their investigation, and those people who send them, who paid them to go and disrupt the electoral process, to go and kill people, to go and abduct people, they should also be brought to book. That is where we'll know that Nigeria is becoming more serious, with issues relating to election.
I want to, I want to just throw this in, because the alibi of the police authorities is to say, oh, electoral offenses are to be prosecuted by the Independent National Electoral Commission. Is it not possible, for instance, to say, to the extent that INEC is overwhelmed? INEC is a federal agency, no question about that. Are we going over to Kano now? All right, that's our correspondent there on the right side of our screen. He's joining us from Kano. Tell us what is happening. I'm not quite sure if I can hear you clearly now, but tell us what is happening in the aftermath of the declaration of the results of the governorship election in the state.
Okay, immediately after the declaration of the result, which the people in Kano have been anxiously waiting for, there was spontaneous eruption of wild jubilation across especially the Kano metropolis. Hundreds of people went to the streets jubilating in different manners. And immediately the Kano State government, through the Commissioner of Information, Malam Mohammed Garba, issued a press release announcing the immediate imposition of curfew on Kano metropolis from dawn to dusk. According to the press statement issued by the commissioner, the measure is taken by the government due to the wild jubilation that spontaneously broke after the declaration of the result. So there is an urgent need to forestall deterioration of peace and order, especially in the state metropolis. That led to the imposition of the curfew. But that notwithstanding, people are still trooping across the streets in Kano, jubilating in their own ways. And as we are coming out, we have seen a lot of mobilization by the police, and they have moved out to curtail the situation. And our reporter from the other house is telling us there is still jubilation ongoing across the town, talking about celebration of the victory of the new Nigeria People's Party governorship candidate Abba Kabir Yusuf. That is the situation. Despite the imposition of the curfew, there is still jubilation across the streets. You can see behind me, turn the camera. You can see a procession of anxious jubilants on the street of Kano that are out to celebrate the victory of the NPP here in Kano State. This is despite the imposition of the curfew by the Kano State government. This is the situation at the moment.
Okay.
All right. My colleague Kirian has a question for you.
Yes.
Majama, we're still going to stay with you in the meantime. Yes.
Majama, from what you have personally observed in Kano, do you believe that there is a need for the curfew. Is this jubilation translating into destruction of property or something? Why the need for the curfew, in your opinion?
Curfew in place, but anxious civilians are trooping to the streets to demonstrate their happiness over the victory. You can see people are already gathering at the right location where we are. This is total defilement of the curfew in place.
Mejama, we hope you are safe. Your name says that you are a man of the people. So that's Mejama Adamu. That's a name. That's a name. I'm sure the persons there, will really, of course, respect. But if we can get the persons off our screen in the meantime, just one question for you to respond to. Mejama, if you can hear us quite clearly. Look, was this outcome expected, or it was a cliffhanger election? It looks like we'll have to return some point, if not because of today's program, maybe some other time, to get to hear Mejama and give us a lowdown, as it were, on the election itself. I'd like to, Mejama, we understand you are still there. I was wondering. Okay, now Mejama, if you are still there, I was saying that, was this outcome expected, or was it that it was a cliffhanger election? In other words, no one was certain who was going to win.
Come again, please, pardon.
All right, Mejama, did this outcome come as a surprise?
The outcome of this election does not come as a surprise in any way, especially if you look at what transpired during the presidential election. There has been large turnout of the NPP political family that cast their ballots in favor of their presidential candidate. In fact, Kano recorded the highest ballot cast for a presidential candidate. So they have been that enthusiastic, they have been that assertive in their political dealings, so the outcome does not in any way come by surprise.
I think we are going to pause you for a while because we might return to you if there is an update with respect to the curfew. From what you have said so far, the people are not adhering to the curfew imposed on the state capital from all indications. So hold on, we are going to come back to you when we deem it necessary. Thank you indeed, Mejama. All right, now continuing with the program today, we have now been joined from Kano via Zoom, Dr. Rauf Zakaria of the Department of Political Science at the Police Academy, Kano State. If you can hear me, Dr. Zakaria, good morning and welcome to the program.
Yeah, good morning and thank you for having me. It's quite difficult to reach you today. It's not been easy.
We understand that on your way to our studio that those who are jubilating over the election disrupted your movement. Now, let us feel your thought, on the situation in Kano, how the election was conducted there, and of course the subsequent declaration of NNPP candidate as the winner of that election in Kano State.
Well, like what the reporter just said now, during the 25th February presidential and national assembly elections, you could see a scenario whereby there was a movement, particularly those that believe in Rabiu Kwankwaso, which they are popularly known as the Kwankwasiya movement. They voted in mass for the NNPP presidential candidate, and Kano happened to be the only state won by that party. Now, going to the gubernatorial elections that was conducted 2 days ago, it was a kind of peaceful atmosphere because there was no element of, political, or we call voting suppression, unlike what was experienced in some other states. People were allowed to vote, in a peaceful manner. And when the results started coming in, the high tension in Kano ordinarily will have been, if somebody else is announced, not the wish of the people, it could have been something different. But because of the fact that the expectation was so high, having won the National Assembly and presidential election on the platform of NNPP, so they also expected that the scenario will still come back during the governorship election. So to them, if Abba Gida Gida, the NNPP candidate, was not announced, it could have been something else. So though the jubilation, the approach being, deployed here might be worrisome because you saw people jubilating, all these sticks, all sorts of, gadgets. As I was trying to drive to the studio this morning, I had to be, shouting Abba Gida Gida just for them to allow me to cross. But it got to a point that the road was totally blocked, so I was unable to actually move again. What I did was to park somewhere, and that is why that was what necessitated this Zoom interaction. But the fact remains that the nature of Kano politics and the movement of Kwankwasia is something that is very, very superb that no one can actually undermine. Despite the fact that the incumbency trying to ensure that the defeat should not happen. But you could see that the people have actually spoken loud and clear, and that tells you that that's one of the beauty of electoral democracy, and that tells you that Kanawa politics is something that is very unique, just that the manner of celebration, which is, worrisome. Because you are celebrating and you are blocking road, you don't allow other people to go to their normal business. The coffee to them is not, in fact, they felt the coffee could have deprived them from celebrating. But thank God, so far, it is celebration in their own way. Despite the fact that the mood of, that celebration looks scary to some of us, but it tells you that the candidature of Abba Gida Gida, that has been the slogan, is a very welcome development in Kano, and the result is not surprising. It could have been surprising if it went other way around, but it is not surprising based on what we have seen and based on the reactions from the street.
Dr. Zachariah, thank you very much. But explain to our viewers, is the name of the candidate Abba Gida Gida, or it means something else? So you tell our viewers what Abba Gida Gida means. And then, two, what was the margin of lead between the winner and the runner-up? Was it so significant as to indicate that this was a victory by a mile?
The margin, I think, from what I've seen, is around over 100,000 votes margin, which is something that is significant because the candidate of NNPP, in person of Engineer Abba, I could not recall his full name, but why they call him Abba Gida Gida, because Gida means like home. They feel that Abba owns, and that has been the popular slogan that almost everyone of us, some of.
Well, Zachariah, you're trying to explain that to us. Gida is home or house, I believe, for those who understand. We hope to get it. All right. Tell us, what is the meaning of Abba Gida Gida?
Like I've said earlier on, Abba Gida means, it means house of.
Well, there's a freeze there from the Zoom connection. Of course, you can see he's in his vehicle. That's probably the safest location for him in the meantime. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on NTA's network service. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
If you
Well, we thank you for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria up to this moment. Well, we've been online with Dr. Rauf Zachariah via Zoom. We've had some glitches, getting him tell us the meaning of Abba Gida Gida. You have to tell us that again so that our viewers understand that. And then You said to us that the election result is not surprising, that is expected. But again, that is the way the people of Kano are celebrating it appears dangerous because they're carrying some weapons and all of that. So let us know what Abba Gida Gida means and why the man was able to win this election.
Yeah, I didn't get that.
Well, my colleague earlier asked you a question about Abba Gida Gida. It appears to be the slogan that led to the winning of NNPP candidate. Let us understand the concept of Abba Gida Gida and why it led to the winning of NNPP governorship election in Kano.
And don't forget the NNPP candidates. In terms of Engineer Abba, he happened to be, a close ally to the presidential aspirant, Engineer Rabi Musa Kwankwaso. And Kwankwasi here in Kano here is a movement. It's like when you talk about the obedient movement, and it is a movement in Kano, and which has also been cutting across some northwestern part of the country. Meanwhile, the slogan Gida in Kano, of course, Gida means home or house. And to them, when they say Abba Gida Gida, it means politically Abba owns the house. Meaning that as far as the Kano politics is concerned, Abba belongs to the local people and he actually belongs to the house of Kanawa. So that tells you that it is their view that once Abba Gida Gida emerges, it's like seeing one of them that has actually emerged. Because it is a movement which Abba has always been part. Don't forget, during the 2019 elections, it was a kind of inconclusive. Inconclusive in the sense that both candidates then, the incumbent governor, Ganduje, and the same engineer Abba, it was a very, very strong contest. To the extent that they had to go for a kind of inconclusiveness, and that was what made Ganduje to emerge. But this time around, the Kanawa said they were not ready for inconclusive election. They wanted a situation whereby the margin would be so clear. They wanted a situation whereby there will be a kind of, clear separation from the NNPP and the APC. And from what you have seen, Abba got over 1 million votes, while his closest rival, governor of the APC, scored more than 800 and something thousand votes. So over 100,000 difference. In that case, there is no way you can talk about cancellation of a result, or you can talk about inconclusive election based on the fact that the margin is so glaring, and that is why this time around, announcement of Abba as the winner, it has actually brought joy to the Kanawa, particularly among the youths.
Well, Dr. Zakaria, I want to take advantage again of your presence with us still. And this is my last question to you. You've used the word Kanawa. Tell our viewers what that means. That's one. Secondly, what is the shape of the State House of Assembly right now?
When you say Kanawa, it's like talking about the Lagosians. So Kanawa is just an adjective trying to describe the people of the Kano. So that's what Kanawa means. Then on the State House of Assembly, for now, we've not gotten the full results based on different constituencies, but it has always been a kind of, it is very close because APC winning some house, while NNPP also winning some.
Okay, it's frozen. All right.
Well, we're beginning to have, glitches there once more. What he has spoken well, I think we have really understood the concept of Abba Gida and all that led to the winning, Kanawa, and so on. Thank you once again, Dr. Rauf. Let's return here. INEC said that they're going to review all the elections. Presidential, House of Assembly, National Assembly, and of course the just concluded election. And I'm wondering why a review of an election after results have been announced. Because if in the process of the review that something is found, something that would have led to not announcing the result is found, how is it going to be treated? Or is there any relevance, really, in trying to do a review of an election that have been announced or whose results have been announced? Doctor?
Okay, yeah, of course, I think it's relevant. There is necessary for them to do a kind of a post-mortem, of their efforts. Now, one, they will compare their outing or their performance in this governorship election vis-a-vis the presidential election, because their performances were quite, different. So they will try to see what led to maybe improved performance, or decreased performance, as the case may be. So going forward, because elections don't end. In the next 4 years, we'll be talking about another set of general elections. Even before that one, you have off-cycle elections. So they'll want to learn from, what has happened. Of course, even if they have announced the winners or declared the winners, there will still the issues arising, maybe for prosecution, as the case may be. It's good for them to review. Not only them, even the police, security agencies need to also review their role in this entire process.
Dr. Izu, you're talking about the normal review of when you carry out a process, you do a review or post-mortem, as the case may be. Right. But I'm talking about complaints.
Okay.
In the of the plot, for instance, in the polling units, for instance, no beavers was used, but results emerged from there, and the opposition party is saying, "Look, this is what happened. It happened for real in the presence of INEC official and so on." If that is reviewed and found, it will affect the result from that polling unit and ultimately affect the result of that particular election. So what I'm saying is that, when you say, even during the presidential election, I recall that the INEC chairman said that promised Dino Melaya and the rest of them who were complaining then, we're going to do a review. There's 1 week for review of the election. I was thinking that the review will definitely affect the result, because, of course, when a review is being done and there's something found, you correct the anomaly, isn't it?
Yeah.
It could affect. So that's what I'm saying. Is there any relevance doing that when already results have been announced?
Of course, and now the law is very clear. If they review, and of course, maybe for instance, the number of cancelled votes or the areas where election didn't take place because of their own because of issues, maybe issues of lack of beavers or violence, and if they record the fact that maybe the votes that would have emanated from those places, are able or are substantial enough to reshape the outcome of the election. The law is very strict in that regard. They will have to redo the election.
Exactly.
So the review is very, very important. Yes.
Well, Dr. Iruru, thank you. Cynthia, I want to shift slightly from the review being contemplated by Dr. Iruru on the basis of the question posed by my colleague. Should we not have an audit of the 2023 elections? And I'm not just talking about the financial accounting process. We're talking about what went right, what went wrong. The country has had over 4 cycles of elections. To shift the dates of the elections, 2011 elections commenced, were postponed. And the snags that occurred on the 25th of February were so significant as to have led to citizen disenchantment. Why did that happen? Will it be sufficient for INEC, even though it is independent, to undertake its own self-examination, or it will require outsiders to also come in, maybe appointed by the federal government, the president, even on his way out now, just about a couple of months left for him to go to. So look, let's have an audit of what went right. So you summon the INEC officials themselves. You also need to understand what went on at the subnational level, because we understand that in some of the recs, it actually wrecked the process.
Yes, I'm glad you brought this point, because that's one of our recommendations, that INEC must conduct an in-depth audit, both internal and external. Now, internal is what is conducted by themselves. External is when you, as an institution, you can reach out to external auditors to come and audit, and we need those 2 layers of audit. That's one point. The other part is the setting up the procedure for sanctions, because we know that there are reports of staff of INEC that were complicit. They were the manipulators of the process and the fraudulent individuals in the process, both electoral officers, resident electoral commissioners, and then ad hoc officials that also manipulated the process. And what we want to see, because when we talk about prosecution, we're talking about security, prosecute the ones you caught. But INEC is responsible for the internal sanctions, and we already saw some decisions taken with respect to some recs and some EOs. We don't think that is sufficient because it's beyond just suspension. We want people that derelicted in their duties to be prosecuted, and thankfully the Electoral Act, the new Electoral Act, provides for imprisonment for staff of the commission that derelict on their duties or breach the process, and we need to see that process is initiated post these elections, because every official who was involved in any form of manipulation or affected the process should be called to order, should be prosecuted, and if possible imprisoned. That way, when people go into INEC next elections, they will go with a sense of responsibility and a sense of accountability in the process. That is the only way we can curb impunity in our electoral system.
Yeah, Cynthia, as we conclude this edition of the program, just a yes or no answer. Do we require to have armed security operatives at the polling units in the next election to avoid snatching of ballot boxes and all of that?
That's a tricky question.
Okay, maybe let's do that. Let's do that another time. All right, we've come to the end of the show today, and of course we've been talking with Dr. Iroro Izu. He's a political economist as well as an election and development expert. He lectures at the Department of Political Science and International Relations, University of Abuja.
Thank you, my
Yeah, we belong to the same constituency. I'm glad to have you here. Cynthia Mbamalo, another election expert. He's also a director of programs, IAGA Africa. Thank you, Cynthia, for coming.
Thank you.
Do you belong to the same constituency with us?
No, I don't.
Sure.
Cynthia has a different a different calling. Yeah. Now, Dr. Rauf Zakaria, you did us proud, by meandering your way through the those who are jubilating over election in Kano to get to a place where you could reach us via Zoom. We thank you for doing that for us. Thank you. Dr. Rauf Zakaria is of the Department of Political Science as well at the Police Academy, Kano State. Thank you indeed for coming. Okay, let's have some
Yeah, before we go, we also have to appreciate NTA staff who joined us. His name Mejama.
Man of the people.
Man of the people.
People almost more.
So we have to let him go.
Exactly.
Let's go down to the foreign scene.
The British Interior Minister has defended a controversial plan to deport asylum seekers arriving in the UK to Rwanda. Sula Braverman spoke to journalists at a news conference attended by Rwanda's Foreign Minister, Vincent Biruta, who also defended the agreement signed between the two countries. She said the plan is to create innovative solutions to be able to offer to these asylum seekers and migrants alike safety, security and opportunities for them to live a decent life. Also in the plans, migrants arriving in the UK in small boats will be flown to Rwanda, where their asylum claims would be processed, and those granted asylum would stay in the African country rather than return to Britain. The agreement between Britain and Rwanda will lead the way in finding a solution which is both humanitarian and compassionate, and also fair and balanced.
We know that it is a new solution, and we keep monitoring the implementation and be ready to adjust the solution, and hope that other countries will join once they see that the solution is working.
Last year, people dying on the Channel in their ill-fated attempt to get to the UK. So the compassionate thing to do and the humanitarian thing to do is find another solution. And that's why I believe, just as the Minister has just said, that there is a real opportunity here to resettle people in safe and secure environments where they can lead a prosperous.
All right, that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. We appreciate your being with us. Tomorrow is another day, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Join us then. Look after yourselves. My name is Kingsley Osadola, but do continue to stay with us on the NTA network service, because at 9 o'clock we'll be going over to our Verdict 2023 studios.
All right, I am Kirin